Welcome everyone to OSG's webinar on the topic of sustainability, the reward of getting it right. My name is Akila Shriram and I'll be the voice in the background hosting the webinar today. And with me I have two of our very own OSG teammates, Brian Kurd and Corinne Dulles, to moderate this conversation today. We have three great speakers from different companies to talk about their experience in building strategy. So Brian, kick it off for us.
Thanks, Akila. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on sustainability and the reward of building effective business strategies around it. My name is Brian Kurd. I lead our North American sales and account management team in the consumer division. When it comes to sustainability and business strategy, it's hard for businesses to decide where to start and what initiatives to implement. And in a certain area of strategy, largely driven around ROI, it's dangerous to make the wrong decision when it comes to implementing these initiatives at the risk of making little or no impact on the customers or revenue. So what I thought we'd do is have a little fun just to kick this off and show you some examples of the cost of getting it wrong. Okay, if you could push the slide forward. So we all know this, so probably an example of maybe even greenwashing, but the idea of Volkswagen's clean diesel. A little funny thing here, but if you're gonna make a claim, make sure you can back it up. Probably don't lie about it, because in the end, it probably would cost you billions, as it did. Another example, if we kick on to the next slide, is Levi's. So with the best intentions, sometimes you can still get it wrong. They put out a line of wasteless jeans that I believe had 20% polyester. The challenge was downstream, it was very difficult to then separate the material back in. So while it was laid out with the best intentions, it was ultimately needed to be reworked, if you will. And then the last example we have is this great looking boot that probably was early for its time, but it was actually Nike's considered line. It was the considered boot. An example of probably understanding your consumers. If you're going to push a product, make sure it aligns with what it is your consumers are actually looking for and actually want. And so we will move this over for really the bulk of the conversation today, which is a discussion on how strategy and how you can, with the rewarding sustainability needs, if you start at the customer level, ultimately will make the best impact on sales, customer retention, and ultimately the reward of getting it right. I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Corinne Dulles, to introduce the speakers.
Thanks, Brian. Hi, everybody. I'm Corinne Dulles. I'm the head of Europe for OSG. So today we're really excited to have three great speakers with us. Stefan Donadrowski. Stefan is the founder of a company called Natayava. Previously to that, he worked at Kellogg's, but I will let Stefan introduce himself. The second speaker we have is Philippe Coquel. Philippe is the head of insights at Barilla Group. So very interesting to hear what Philippe has to say on the topic of sustainability. And then finally, least but not last, we have Alex Peters, who is the Purpose Insight lead at Reckitt. So welcome everybody, and please introduce yourselves in the order I suppose that I just went. Thank you.
Thank you. So, hi everybody, my name is Stephen Donadrowski. I currently work as an applied behavioral scientist. My previous job at Kellogg was heading up behavioral science for them on a global basis. Sustainability was one of the big issues that we were constantly looking at and reviewing, and learned an awful lot on our way, but know that there's lots more to learn. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Philippe Coquel. I'm managing Insight for Barilla based in Paris. The Barilla Group is known for its pasta and its sauce, but we own as well Vasa, which is a crisp bread brand in the Nordics and known as well in Germany and in France. And we own as well Aris, which is a brand of soft bread and viennoiserie in France.
Hi everyone, I'm Alex Peters. I work at Reckitt, which is a consumer healthcare company which does work in hygiene, nutrition, and consumer healthcare. And my role is brand purpose insights. I work on how we enable our brands and provide the capabilities for them to deliver bigger benefits for the people on this planet and for the planet itself. And you're on mute, Corinne.
There's always one. So thanks a lot for everybody. Now let's start with the basic, I think. What is important for us is to start by understanding, okay, what does sustainability mean in your position? It can mean so many different things. So I think it would be very nice that you each interpret what it means for you. Alex?
You're mixing up the order just to keep me on my toes, I see, no problem. So I think going first here, sustainability is a very big word, right? It's a word that everyone has their own meaning for. I think that's an important thing to think about. Even within the world of Reckitt, it can mean more than one thing, depending on what you're trying to do and who you're talking to. What it means for me in my role isn't necessarily the same as what it means for someone working in a different part of our organization. But I'll try and address them both and talk to what each of those are. So when it comes to certain topics that might be top of mind when people talk about sustainability in these sort of industries, it would be perhaps be things like plastic reduction or carbon emissions reduction. And that's absolutely correct. For us, all of our brands need to make sure they're picking up that torch. And we look for ways to be efficient across the portfolio of brands and to get sort of economies of scale in the way we approach those, but also talk about where the brands that are creating the biggest challenges are and how we can address those. If I then take the example of one of the things that I already mentioned, carbon emissions, we see that a huge portion of carbon emissions relating to our products are what are known as Scope 3 emissions. Scope 3 emissions are basically outside of our processes, outside of our supply chain. They're things like the usage of our products once you've got them home. We have historically had very little control over that. But that's one of the things that I work on in the context of brand purpose. There's no one single solution, and we ask each of our brands to stand for sort of one area where they can make a disproportional difference. And it's about what each of our brands can own and make a real difference on. For example, one example that I've spoken about before that some of you may have heard is our Finnish brand of automatic dishwasher products. Here, that brand stands for, on top of doing things like I already mentioned, reducing the carbon or the plastic in the packaging. And in fact, they've just taken some brand new packaging to the market, which is plastic free. It's about water reduction through the behaviors of how you use our products. What we learned from research is that consumers were very often pre-rinsing things before putting them in the dishwasher. So they got washed twice. But that's using much more water than is needed to get the results we're looking for. And so for me, in my role, where the brand stands for that water reduction, it's also about how we enable people in their own homes or out of their homes to make the difference through their own actions and behaviors. And through that, making sure the brand is credible in that space. So that in my Finnish example, the dishes obviously require water, so standing for water conservation is a good fit there, and they can make a meaningful difference. So for me, that's what sustainability means. It's about finding the unique place where our brands can play and make a disproportionate difference. But on top of that, there are lots more angles of sustainability being taken up at Reckitt as well.
Thanks, Alex. We had several discussions around that, and I think that's fascinating how your vision is on the sustainability. So thank you very much. I appreciate your feedback. Philip, would you like to go ahead with your views on what sustainability means to you?
At Barilla, we have a program with a big name. It's good for you, good for the planet. But you know, I will take concrete example to explain what we're trying to do. But basically, we're trying to put better products. Better products means better packaging. So in some markets, and some of you might have noticed on the shelf, we are going 100% paper packaging. And it's been very interesting, and we might develop on that, Corinne, if you want later. It means so better packaging. So we having as well for bread or soft bread, we having plastic packaging. So we're thinking about better packaging than this to remove the plastic from the packaging completely. For our product, we actually want better product. And what it means is that we're trying to change the recipes to remove the additives, to remove the sugar, to remove the salt from the product. But as well, it's a very interesting example, and Corinne, you tell me if you want me to develop on that, because relating to the topic of the webinar is two examples where actually it's by doing the right thing we got it wrong, or the consumer had a very different reaction to what we were hoping.
Yes, and that's going to be the part of some of the questions that we have coming later on. So it'd be great to hear about that and to develop on that later on, Philip. Fantastic. Thank you. Stephen, how about you?
Thanks, Corinne. So for me, sustainability is basically all about people. It's about people and what they do. If you look at what we do compared to what our parents did, a lot of our behaviors are relatively negative. The average person keeps an item of clothing or wears an item of clothing less than 7 times, I believe now. As opposed to our parents, we now expect fruit to be available all year round. We don't buy things that are seasonal. We don't take products that are easily available or local. We expect everything all of the time. And this is quite difficult. These are the kind of behaviors that, you know, Alex and Philippe were referring to that we need to start looking at changing. I think the other key thing is that, and we spend quite a lot of time looking at trade-offs. And even sustainability experts aren't absolutely sure on what the best ways of addressing sustainability are, because there are so many of them. Is it better if you've got packaging that's recycled or recyclable? Is it better if you have sustainable sourcing than either recycled or recyclable packaging? What about organic? What happens if something looks natural? How do all of these things work together, and how do people actually make trade-offs? And as far as I'm concerned, we need we need a common language to stop this being foreign to everybody. We need to create a lexicon that everybody can work to together, because otherwise what we're going to see is brands picking up specific types of sustainable badging, let's say, which they do very well. So if I'm a product that is very sustainably sourced, I will pick on sustainable sourcing. If I'm a product that is easily recyclable, I'll pick on recycling. Now, how that helps people is unclear at this point in time. In fact, what we know is it creates a lack of clarity. So what we need is a common language, because otherwise, I think Corinne will come on and talk about this later. Otherwise, I suspect regulation is around the corner. Because if we're not going to do it ourselves, somebody else will make us do it.
That's right. This is coming on the next topic, but absolutely, we've had that conversation several times, Stefan, and you know, it's very interesting to hear your ideas on that as well. I think it's yes, we're looking forward to it. So, you know, how do you and your company drive or align around those issues? I'm sure that you take very different approaches. So, what are those? What are those approaches for you? Alex, you're first in the list.
Sure thing. Yeah, for me, again, I already said there's more than one way that we could think about some of these topics, but what we do at Reckitt to make sure we've got a common framework and that we're addressing the most important issues in the context of the brand purpose space where I'm operating is we use the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Those provide us a sort of framework, as it were, that it's not just ours, but is external and is used by not just us, but by others. It provides a way to help us identify the biggest issues about the world today. And also it's something that our partners or the potential partners we'd like to work with can also leverage. Beyond that, we also make sure we're joining other sort of important forums where things like governments, brands, and people can come together to have dialogue, to make decisions, and to drive this agenda forward. We need to be a part of that because it's that wider solution where individuals are working alongside government, alongside companies, and alongside brands, all towards that common goal that allows us to make the impact really meaningful and make sure that everyone is working together to the same benefit. Just like I shared the example before about people doing things in their home, there's no one single owner of how we make sure sustainability is delivered properly. We need to motivate and enable as many people as possible to pick up that torch. Internally, within the business, we do a lot of things. We educate, we create events where People are in different settings to where they're normally being, where they can learn around the importance of this. They can learn about what impact they can have to give them some agency and some power. But we also, beyond sort of educating, encouraging, we also mandate. We create frameworks and KPIs that allow us to make sure that these things are being achieved. And we do it in a sort of top-down manner so that we can create checkpoints, moments where things don't continue unless we can show that they're going to be delivering against the sustainability needs that they have to deliver, that they're always going to be better for the planet than what came before. So that's the sort of goals we use to make sure that we're operating towards, as I say, a common goal, but a common goal that we can share not just internally, but also externally to help get as many people on the same journey.
Thank you. That's not an easy task, but it's great to already have a framework that it needs to start somewhere. So I think that's fantastic. Great. So Philip, how about you?
Yeah, we have a vision, so good for you, good for the planet, but then we're very much category product driven. We approach it very differently. If we're talking pasta, soft bread, of crisp bread, and the packaging is different, the recipe are different. And this is where it becomes interesting, because then, we take it for pasta, we bring it to pasteurized, or I can get better pasta, we can get better packaging. Then, we get the team involved, we have the R&D working on it, and then we design your KPIs and what we need, and we test it. And this is where it really becomes interesting, because sometimes, as I was saying as an introduction, the consumers, they do not want the changes that you want to make. So you think you're going down the right path, you think you're going to go and propose better product and everybody is going to be behind you. And the consumers say, no, actually, I'd rather have my other packaging, or I'd rather have my other recipe. And this is where the discussion starts to happen, and the arbitrage and the decision on okay, do we push on where we want to go and to be more sustainable, have this better product out, or are we following what the consumer are saying?
Very difficult trade-off indeed. And I guess that, there will be an answer, but yes, very difficult trade-off. Thank you. Stefan, how about you?
Well, look, I mean, it's not really my place, and I don't think it's key here to discuss the sort of Kellogg sustainability policy overall, because it's there, it's published. I mean, like Alex, Kellogg, like Reckitt, have a full 360, and indeed like Barilla, a full 360 program in place. I think, rather like Philippe, the thing that I find really interesting is the bits that I was working on around consumers and how they make trade-offs, and looking at better ways to actually understand this, different types of research, technology and techniques that we can actually use to prioritize and to understand how we can make sustainability more attractive. Because at the end of the day, the win-win-win is when we manage to produce products that we can that are better for the environment and more sustainable, that consumers want and that they buy, right? So actually, it's one of those things that for us, the in some ways the big challenge, as it is for Philippe, is to actually find how to make sustainability really attractive for people. And
that starts with understanding what matters to them, what is most important to them. Absolutely, always going back to starting from the customer and customer-centric way. So yes, fantastic. So now, if we look at what you believe what sustainability is and how then it differs from what matters to customers, how do you balance that cost? How do you balance business priorities, consumer demands with regard to issues of sustainability? How do you approach that? So maybe we start again with, let's go with Philip this time.
It's generally a managerial decision, So when the research tell us that the consumer do not want do not want the change that we want to apply on the packaging, on a recipe, or on an advertising or some claims. You know, and if we think we're going the right way, it's the management that makes the decision. But then, I mean, this is where, because if we put in place and we are aware and we know and that we're going to lose some market share, and when this happens, this is where the real tension is happening, because we hope we're going to regain the market share, but we don't know when. And this is when the management was, okay, fine, yes, we go with that. When you start losing 6-point market share, everybody starts, well, okay, but now it's hurting the business and it's hurting everybody. And we luckily we still a family-owned company, so we have the leverage of being able to say, like, well, let's wait, let's give us some time, let's give, you know, we really believe in what we're proposing to the consumers, so let's give it a chance. But I see that sometimes we could shut it down, you know, within a couple of months. And this is really complicated. This is really complicated.
Absolutely. And you don't have the shareholders there, so you're okay to make their own decision, but then again, you still have responsibility for the company, the employees, and everybody. So yeah,
but then, you know, you have what they think in Italy, but then you have the country, what they think as well, and they say, like, yes, okay, we're happy to take a hit on the market share, but you know, our objectives at the end of the year still stands. So are we going to achieve that?
Yeah.
Are you going to revise the objective? No. So, well, you know, and so fortunately, most of the time we've been right to pursue what we wanted to do, but it took time. It took time to change the mentality, to change how people buy bread, what they expect in their taste, and to be able to tell them, look, if you remove the additive, the salt, the sugar in one product, yes, it's going to taste different. You know, you can't have both. You can't have something that's really good for your health with you know, no butter, no sugar, nothing.
Yeah. And does that mean you take decisions that are less bold, maybe just to test out the market, or do you just go straight away for a very bold decision?
I think we made a mistake on one launch where we changed many things at once. And now the learnings that we have is we make one change at a time. So we're gonna change the packaging, we're gonna change the recipe, but we're not gonna change the packaging, the recipe, and everything together, because then it really gets, even if you communicate, it's really difficult to get the message across to the consumers.
Yeah, I understand. Okay, thank you, Philippe. Very good. Stefan, what about you?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think, you know, most businesses in CPG are finding the same kind of thing, particularly in food. I mean, I think the analogy of health to sustainability is a good one. People know they should be healthy, but they don't want healthy because it probably doesn't taste as good in their view. People know they should want sustainable, but they don't necessarily want to create the sacrifice that might be what sustainable is, right? So we don't want to change because most people don't actually think what they do is bad. And at the moment, if you have lots of people buying your products and interacting with your businesses, then why on earth would you want to change that? The sort of move towards good, I think, is something that businesses, and you know, I struggle to find a business nowadays that doesn't have a sustainability agenda and isn't trying to change and it isn't trying to move forward. And quite often, I mean, rather like Philippe, I find that the business wants to move forward quicker than people do. So a lot of the time it's about how can we bring that through and make it easier, make those choices easier for people. And you know, those choices aren't easy for people. I mean, we know that for example, if you put too many stamps onto packaging, people stop believing that it's true. So if you put recycled, recyclable, organic, and 2 more, it just sounds too good to be true. So it probably is right. So that's how people start viewing it. So you have to be very careful when you're looking at what you're actually doing and how it actually works. Because if you change too much, as Philippe was saying, or you don't educate people in the right kind of way, then you can end up running in a direction that your consumers aren't going to run with you, if that makes sense. So it's core that you don't just think about the business, but think about the business, the consumer, and also just the environment that all of this is going on in. Because if you are the guys who are making the change, that's one thing. If everybody has sustainable of some kind then actually it stops having any form of advantage, and you start needing to think about it in a different way. Because you're absolutely right with the question, which is, at some point in time, this is about the business, and this is about how you want to be a business and what you believe is right as a business, as much as it is about anything else. And you know, I think in some ways Philippe's very lucky to have a business that's family owned. I'm sure it's got equal number of downsides, but I think being able to at least make those kind of tough decisions is really important.
Yeah. And I think that there's another element as well, is that, you know, people may change their behavior on one front, but not on everything. So they may decide to keep eating and buying the same pasta, for example, with the plastic window or the same ingredient, but then do some trade-off on something else. So there's balance, there's that green balance that they're doing. And we don't know if it's going to be on our product or something else.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's really important. I mean, even to the extent that we know that people make trade-offs, even where, say, they're buying a product in a package that says it's not easily recyclable, but they still put it in their recycling and think that's good enough. The idea of people's wish fulfillment by recycling is a real problem that they have within the industry. So people are putting in dirty packaging and packaging that can't be recycled and all sorts of things, because they want to be good. Everybody wants to do their bit, right? But if they're going to do it, they don't want to wash out the packaging or check that it's the right stuff, because it's really quite a complicated series of decisions we're asking people to do, and things that people essentially at the end of the day don't want to learn. So as businesses, we're going to have to make that easier for them to get them to do it, because otherwise you're going to find people who are trading off things that don't even trade off, if that makes sense, let alone things that do.
Right, the wrong way. Yeah, absolutely. And Alex, that's something you find as well. I mean, you know, with the Finnish example, it's like, you know, are people going to start rinsing their plates? You know, how do you affect that? So,
yeah, I think there's some really interesting points have already been made here, but that I want to reinforce. One of them is that it's not always going to have to be a trade-off. Sometimes there are opportunities to find a sort of win-win scenario here. Maybe someone is not making the sustainable choice we would hope they would make because of a cost concern, for example. But when you really do the work and get to understand the reality of people's lives and where they're coming from, and you realize that that might be the reason, is there the possibility of creating solutions that are both better for the environment and cost effective, for example, as the win there? Of course, if it was as easy as that, everyone would have done it already. I'm not saying it's simple, but looking for those win-wins is a mindset to try and find the ways that you can unlock that. And for us, that's the opportunity that brand purpose brings, because our brand purposes should be really aligned versus what our brands are trying to achieve. And they should be aligned to what the brand can actually do and the heritage and credibility it has. As long as that's there, then we can become a sort of driver of that win-win by delivering a benefit on top of simply the sustainability one, while also making sure we're active in that space. It might also be that these trade-offs can be kept, but made a bit more palatable, a bit simpler, a bit more intuitive, whatever the right language there is. It's about thinking about how we get people to understand their own power and the real difference they can make. People might not realize that the one simple action they can change is actually scaling up to make a difference over time or over the number of people who do it, and don't feel like they can make a difference. But we try and show people the difference they can make and make that something that's tangible for them. Increasingly, to make those trade-offs palatable and understood, we're leveraging tools like the behavioral science learnings that exist around how you get people to take up certain behaviors. to find the ways that we can make the sort of the things we want to change into tangible actions they can take, and encourage them to take them. And that works not just for the people at the end of the chain who are using our products, that works for our own internal people as well. That works for those who work with us. We think about the ways to make those trade-offs as minimal and as simple as possible. And that's once again driving us towards, okay, now we've made it simple, there's a win-win. Everyone gets the benefit here. And therefore the environment wins, the society wins, our company wins, and the individual wins as well. And increasingly, that's what we're trying to get towards. Even though I already said it's not simple, that's sort of the objective, that's the direction of travel we look to take.
Yes, I think that's a very interesting point to, quantify how collectively or individually we can actually make a difference. And that's absolutely true, that is like, when you give them stars and they start getting more stars and then they get a book at the end. It's very much seeing physically how much difference we're making, and that's impactful. So very interesting point. So
yeah, Corinne, actually, I'd like to build on that quickly, because it's very interesting what Alex is saying. It's not only about trending off, because what we see is actually we need to start targeting better. And that when we change a product, a packaging, or a recipe, sometimes our core target is changing. So, and we premiumize, or so we're addressing another population. So we need to think about another product that's going to retarget our previous target. So we are undergoing a very exhaustive exercise about really understanding our targets and their needs, and how we can address these needs.
And also, I think one very important point is to understand how many people will be, by understanding your target, you can start sizing it, I mean. So you can start understanding how many people this will impact, this change will impact.
Absolutely.
And then you can make a decision. Like,
yeah,
the
quantification, the first part of the targeting for us is really the quantification.
Yeah.
And to see the size of the pie.
Yeah. Exactly. So then decisions can be made in terms of how much more impact can you make by changing target group. And that's important. That's a very important point as well. So thank you for that, Philip. So in the future, what do you see coming for strategy around sustainability? Stephen, I think you had some points on that that you touched upon earlier. So feel free to jump in now.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and I think it's really important to say, that there are plenty of opportunities here for businesses. There are lots of things that can do and that can be done, and I think that's really important, because one of the things that I see coming around the corner is regulation. I think sooner or later, if we look at what's going on in California, or you look at what's happening within the European Union, and there's a number of other different places as well, they're really big kind of driving forces when it comes to sustainability regulation. And I think that, just as we're seeing effectively petrol and diesel cars being phased out, in Europe from about 2030, we're going to start seeing this apply to pretty much everything. That there isn't going to be a choice at some point. And so it's going to be really interesting to see how you create those win-wins, as Alex was saying, or indeed win-win-wins, which are good for the environment, the consumer, and the business. And I think that, this is going to be really important. I think the other thing that we're seeing, and the other big trend, is ethical investment. So for businesses which aren't owned by a family, for those that are being floated on the stock exchange, actually there's a real pressure there to start looking at more sustainable ways of production, more sustainable kind of products, sourcing, pretty much everything, packaging, the whole 9 yards, and I think that that's only going to increase. But the great thing about it is, as these things increase, the cost of doing them goes down, and actually these things can start to become mainstream and move into it. I mean, I think the last thing I see coming around the corner in terms of the strategy is, if we get to a better common language, I do see more pressure coming from consumers. So when you end up with consumer pressure for sustainability, you end up with investment pressure for sustainability and regulation around it. I can see nothing happening except for us ending up with better, more sustainable products at a cheaper price going forwards. And I think that that's going to have a profound impact on strategy. And I think businesses that aren't preparing for it are probably going to start preparing for it very soon, because it is just around the corner.
Absolutely. What do you think on that, Alex?
I can only agree with almost everything I heard there. I really do agree. To me, the theme that's the change is perhaps being held accountable for the difference you're making. To me, ethical investing is an example of that, where the investors are more and more holding companies accountable for delivering not only the profit, but the profit in a sustainable way that continues to benefit the world they're a part of, with that long-term vision. I also think that's true around how consumers or end users or people in the world are going to evolve over time, is to become more sophisticated in their understanding of these challenges, and to hold businesses more accountable not just to show what they've been able to say they've done, but to actually be able to demonstrate the difference that's made, to demonstrate that they're really making those tangible steps and actions come to life in the real world. I think that the other third thing that I will pick up is that sustainability, I already mentioned, I think is a big, big word. And to me, there's the social aspect of sustainability, that there are aspects of education, of diversity, of things like that that all come together to drive us towards a more sustainable future. And that I think we'll see more and more communication around that sort of space across a large number of industries as they become conscious of that shift that's happening, I believe. I think that brands are increasingly communities where younger generations who have been connected throughout their whole lives through social media and other tools like that are creating a more of a global narrative that will allow people to have that common framework that was mentioned, that will allow them to therefore be more challenging and more likely to hold people accountable. And to provide votes of confidence that will allow others to succeed where perhaps they wouldn't, or people who had been succeeding will find themselves struggling when they lack that vote of confidence. So I hope that's a shift we see, because I think it will be only for the better, and I think it's an opportunity as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would be looking forward to that. I think it'd be great. Absolutely. Philip, do you have?
Yeah, let me take a different angle here. I mean, we're not short of ideas. The top idea is there, the will of the company is there, the will of the team is there, it's great, and everything. I was mentioning about getting packaging, removing the plastic for the packaging, but now we're facing one problem: we cannot get enough paper. You know, we increasing the pasta. People are buying more pasta, which is great, but our suppliers cannot cope on the demand, and this is really an issue. And we see that. I mean, I'm mentioning pepper, but you know, for pesto, we're using. You know, we have a very strong compliance on the pesto with our supplier and everything. We cannot get enough pesto from the suppliers. So it's great, the demand is great and everything, but it's becoming really complicated on how, you know, with the demand growing, with the constraint on the suppliers increasing, how we will be able to maintain that. And probably this is going to be the limitation. I mean, the will is there, the drive is there, but there's going to be some limitation, and this is how we can overcome this limitation.
So do we need to rely more on innovation?
We're not going to remove the tomatoes from the tomato sauce, you know, we're not going to remove the pesto from the, we're trying to make simpler products that are, you know, as simple as possible, as true as possible to the original recipe. Pasta is fairly simple to make. It's wheat, salt and water. And it's about you get the best quality of wheat that you possibly in the pasta, but it's how we can get I mean, with the crisis, the pricing crisis, the inflation crisis, all that is becoming an issue, and I mean it's pretty much day to day. I have to say on some issues, you know.
So is the current crisis impacting even more the difficulties of driving sustainability strategies?
Not for us, not at the moment, but if it lasts, it would. It would. I mean, not on the wheat, but on the pepper. Yes, it's having and it's putting on all some initiative that we had.
Okay. So I think that this concludes the questions we had. It was really, really interesting to hear all your points of view and the variations of how the strategies are applied to different type of companies. I think we have some questions. I can see that we have some questions. So maybe Akila, do you want to
yes, I can answer them.
Thank you.
So we have a couple questions from the audience. The first one is, does your messaging on products differ based on the market, say US or EU or Asia, or do you focus on different messaging as it relates to how you support sustainability efforts? Alex, do you want to start first?
Sure thing, yeah, it's a great question. I think in the role I'm doing where we're talking about brand purpose, we try and set one consistent brand fight, one thing they can stand for that's going to be consistent wherever you are in the world. But we localize that, right? There's always going to be a nuance of what that means depending on where you are and what background you've come from and what you understand. So yes, we do vary those, but we also try and have that common thread running between them so that the brand has a consistent voice and a consistent stance that it's taking against one particular issue. Having said that as well, I said sustainability is a really big topic, so that's one angle of it. And then of course you will have things that are particularly resonating with a certain person in a certain market, certain group of people who might be more open to certain messages. And if they're able to make a difference by bringing that message to the table there, that's exactly something we will do as well. So it's about the variety of different things is an important thing to consider, and geographic differences that exist are an important thing that we take into account, absolutely.
Philippe, do you have anything to add to
it? Yeah, I was actually about to build on that. Yeah, no, I mean, completely. I mean, I was talking about targeting it's at country level, pretty much. So, and category level. So we definitely, the products remain the same, fairly, across the different countries where we operate, but definitely the message and how we're going to approach the different target groups, consumer groups, is very different.
Stephen, anything to add?
Yeah, very briefly. I mean, firstly, I completely agree with everything I've heard so far. I think it's really interesting when you do have very similar products that in all markets, because that allows you to have a look at how you do them differently. I'm not sure if it's still true, but one of the things that I do remember is that sustainability in the US often focused on power and green energy supply, whereas that doesn't tend to be very big in Europe. Last time I did an audit of sustainability around the world, the things that people talk about in different markets are different. The things that actually pique people's interest are different. That doesn't mean, and that makes it quite challenging for businesses, because if you have something that's made with 100% green energy, and yet people aren't interested in that, then that means your business has a bit of an issue, right? Because it's incredibly difficult and tough to get people interested in certain parts of sustainability in some ways. I mean, it's much easier to ride the wave of what people are already interested in than it is to change and create new. And this is just about behavior in general. It's not about sustainability. It's just, in general, if you have to educate people, it costs a lot of money, relatively speaking. So I think it's, my experience in answer to your question is, the question is yes and yes. Yes, there are, different messages in different places, and yes, they often have to be culturally sensitive to what people are doing. But at the same time, there is an ongoing drive, and it's interesting when sustainability is the focus for messaging and for audiences, and for identifying who you're going to target.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing your insights on this question. The next question we had, I think this is more of a general question. They said it's for Stephen, but I think all of you can answer it. We talked about it during our preparatory meetings for this webinar. Stephen, you mentioned something that piqued my interest. You focused on a common vocabulary. How do you come up with a common vocabulary which all of us consumers can understand clearly? Stephen, do you want to start, and then we'll go to the others?
Okay, I mean, I'm quite happy to start on this. I think everybody here has got an opinion on this one. And I think this is something that is big news for everybody. I think the problem is not coming up, how do we come up with a vocabulary that's good for all consumers? I think the problem is, how do we come up with a vocabulary that all businesses are agreed upon, most governments buy into, and that we can use on a universal basis. And I mean, by universal, we don't even have to make it global. I mean, it could be US versus European versus other markets, but actually creating one language that people use and one lexicon and one agreement in terms of what sustainability is and what good sustainability looks like. So we stop people competing on a range of chalk and cheese methods that are totally impossible for people to compare. I think is really important. I should probably hand over to the guys now, because otherwise I'm going to speak for the remaining 12 minutes or whatever on this alone. So I'm going to stop there. But any other questions, or if you want me to speak more, please let me know.
Perfect. Alex, do you want to hop on that topic?
Yeah, I'll keep mine short because I agree with a lot of that. But just to say, I already mentioned it in one of my first answers, but what we're leveraging is the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as a framework for how we align our brand purposes. And I think that that's one possible framework, but it's a relatively widely accepted one. United Nations is a decent sized organization, if that makes sense. They've got some sway, and we found them to be a sort of inclusive set of goals that allows us to think about the different areas we can impact. And it's about finding partners or finding central groups like the United Nations who can bring together all the different stakeholders to create that common framework, and then also making sure it works. The last thing I want to say on this one is that there's a museum near where I am that has an exhibition about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So this isn't just for businesses, this isn't just for governments, this is also relevant to individuals as well. And that speaks to what I said earlier, bringing those three together is where you get the real wins here.
Philippe?
Yeah, it's a very interesting topic. I mean, in France, there is an initiative to have a ranking from A to E, on the quality of the food products, and companies are pushing back. The government is trying to put that in place, and so consumer can see that A is good and E is not so good for you. But companies are pushing back, and you see why they're pushing back, because of course a cheese, is not as good as something that a pasta that's been only made with wheat and water. And this is where the challenge is going to lie, because first we need to align among ourselves as operators, as companies, but as well there is a knowledge or a really the consumer understand exactly what it means. I mean, we know that that some products are not going to be as good for you than some others, but you're still going to buy them. I mean, we are talking all along through that. Sometimes the consumer, they want more sustainability, they want better product, but they're still going to go and indulge themselves. And I don't know, Stefan. I mean, have you see that? I mean, because we very much pro saying like, yes, we want this rating in place, but we see other companies that say no, we want nothing to do with it, because it's products that's going to appear really bad to everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I see that a lot. I mean, there's a lot of regulation around food at the moment, and it's all around health. And I think that this is only going to get worse if we're not careful in terms of when they start regulating sustainability, because then we're not just comparing foodstuffs, we're comparing, how do you compare pasta with washing powder? Or how do you compare washing up liquid with, I don't know, shoes? You know, we're actually going to have to start understanding, and I think at that point in time we've got to look at and be sensible and work out that it's probably within category. You know, that looking at the potato chips marketplace, or looking at the I don't know, how you wash your dishes marketplace. I don't know whether that extends to both, you know, hand washing and machine washing. Alex probably has more of an opinion about this than I do, but you know, it's going to have to be, all these things are relative, and then we're going to have to work out how to then create a language that encourages people to move from a certain set of behaviors to another. Now, I've never known any business which finds it hard to fit in with regulation and doesn't you know, find it very positive, that wants to just take that lying down, right? I don't think any of us do. But on the other hand, I think, you know, that there is an understanding of I suppose a desire within all the businesses I've definitely worked with recently to you know, even the conversation, you know, the conversations we've had, it just proves it, that there is a desire within business to get this done. The case is, how do we do it? And I wish I had an answer for that in a lot of detail, but it's got to be comparative. It's got to be within categories, and those categories probably have to be quite small. Now, how we create a common language around that, do we actually look at it in a slightly different way and go, okay, how do we think about packaging and think about it on verticals? Or how do we think about, you know, sourcing? How do we think about, and do we then create? I mean, there are a number of different models out there. I think what the problem is at the moment is that everybody's using a slightly different one, or not using a model at all. And that's only going to confuse consumers. And so as long as we can find something that I think is fair, and there are many different ways of doing it, then I think that it just has to be that we all have to get into agreement that we're going to use that system and try and apply it, because otherwise I think that somebody will come and apply a system to us which probably won't be as good as the one that we could develop ourselves. But yeah, I mean, I'm with you all the way on that one, Philippe, and yeah, food regulation is not that easy.
Thank you all for your insights on this. We have a couple more questions, but I think we're at time. So I'm going to turn it over to Brian Kurd to close us out for today.
Thanks, Gil. If you just want to pop up the slide. First of all, thanks to Corinne for moderating, Philip, Alex, and Stephen for your insightful conversation. We'll leave you with this, a little bit of insight. At OSG, we're a marketing and analytics technology company. We're really focused in on how and why customers make decisions in order to better predict their future needs. We've done a lot of work in the sustainability area, and 3 things we'll leave you with, and encourage you to contact us if you'd like to discuss this further. Some of the findings that we've seen are, and we talked a bit about this through the conversation, but one of the insights we had was the relative importance of plastic reduction based on the consumer's proximity to a body of water, or in particular the ocean. So I think there were some conversations around whether you change your messaging based on geography, as an example. We've also seen some interesting connections between the idea of personal health and then the broader ESG. So how do those two compare? What's the relative importance? And the last thing that we called out was, and I think we're seeing a lot of this right now, especially during arguably recessionary times, but the different segments of customers and their willingness to pay for sustainability. I think I read recently, in some cases as high as somewhere like 20% they'd be willing to pay. So with that, this was a great conversation. The last slide, I believe, has Corinne and myself's contact information. We'd encourage you to reach out to us with any questions. And thanks everyone for their time. Have a great rest of the day.